My name is Courtney Jenkins, and at the ripe old age of 29, I was precisely 3 days away from marrying the man I'd foolishly convinced myself was my forever person. You know, that delightful fantasy we all cling to whilst ignoring approximately 17 red flags flapping frantically in our peripheral vision. That particular dream didn't so much fade gently into the night as it did spectacularly detonate at a family dinner when his parents, bless their subtlety-free souls, slammed a prenuptial agreement onto the table with all the finesse of a sledgehammer to a piñata and barked, "Sign here or get out." His sister Michelle, meanwhile, cackled like she'd just witnessed the punchline to the world's cruelest joke. Spoiler alert. I was apparently meant to be the punchline. They were utterly convinced they'd cornered me, trapped like a mouse who'd wandered into a very expensive, very pretentious maze. What they didn't know, and oh how I'd cherished this little secret, was that the numbers lounging quite comfortably in my bank account could purchase their gaudy mansion twice over and still have enough left for a nice holiday in the Maldives. I wasn't about to bow. Not today, Satan. Not today. Just then, because timing is apparently a theatrical art form, my phone buzzed. I answered, and my lawyer's voice came through, calm and almost obscenely amused, like a man who'd been waiting his entire career for this exact moment. What he said made my lips curl into a smile, the sort of smile that makes people profoundly uncomfortable, whilst their smug grins froze like they'd been flash frozen for a particularly vindictive episode of a cooking program. Before I get properly stuck into my tale of woe, betrayal, and financial plot twists that would make a soap opera writer weep with envy, please do subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Because nothing says, "I'm about to unpack my emotional trauma for strangers," quite like crowdsourcing your global audience for their local time zones. I'm genuinely curious to know how far my story of romantic catastrophe has spread. Hopefully, it'll help someone realize they're in a rubbish relationship sooner than I did. You're welcome in advance. Right, where was I? Ah yes, I smiled, stood up with all the dignity I could muster, and walked out of that godforsaken beach house. Wiped those smug grins clean off their faces, I did. His call came mere seconds later, voice cracking like a teenage boy's during puberty, but I cut it short. Because, darling, the real fight was only just beginning, and I needed to conserve my energy for the absolute circus that was about to unfold. I grew up in a modest house in Brooklyn, and when I say modest, I mean the sort of place where upgrading meant getting curtains that actually matched. My parents, both nurses, drilled into me the value of standing on my own 2 feet with a sort of relentless determination usually reserved for military boot camps. Money was tight but sufficient, and they pushed education as the golden ticket out of our circumstances. Which, to be fair, is the immigrant dream in a nutshell. Work yourself to the bone so your children can have a marginally less exhausting life. I clawed my way through NYU on scholarships, burning the midnight oil with such dedication that I'm fairly certain I single-handedly kept the local coffee shop in business. I graduated top of my class in finance, which is essentially a degree in making money whilst pretending you're not absolutely obsessed with making money. That hustle shaped me, molded me into someone who could spot a good investment opportunity from approximately 7 miles away. I learned to pick stocks that doubled my savings by junior year, which made me either brilliant or extraordinarily lucky. Probably a bit of both if we're being honest. My aunt, my biggest cheerleader, the woman who actually believed I could do anything, saw my potential too. When she passed during my final semester, she left me £6 million from decades of quiet, clever trades. Nobody would have guessed from her simple life in Queens that she was sitting on that kind of wealth. She was the original stealth wealth practitioner, living modestly whilst her portfolio did absolutely obscene things in the background. I poured most of that inheritance into safe investments, letting compound interest work its mathematical magic, and used a chunk to launch my fintech app, a tool designed for everyday people to manage investments without needing a finance degree or a trust fund. By 27, the company was valued at £3 million, pushing my total worth to a cool $9 million. And did I shout this from the rooftops? Did I? Hell, I kept it under wraps tighter than the crown jewels. I lived in a decent apartment in Michigan City near the lake, drove a reliable Honda that had seen better days but refused to die, and dressed from shops that didn't require a second mortgage. I wanted my work to speak, Not my bank account. Revolutionary concept, I know. Only my parents, my sister Angela Jenkins, my friend Kimberly Ross, and my colleague Danielle Ross knew the truth about my finances. This inner circle was tighter than Fort Knox, and for good reason. Angela, 3 years my senior, was my rock. The sort of older sister who'd simultaneously lecture you and bail you out of trouble. She'd ring me from her Chicago teaching job, swapping stories about dodging toxic family drama from her friends' in-laws like she was narrating a particularly grim soap opera. "Stay sharp, Courtney," she'd say with the world weariness of someone who'd seen some things. "People hide agendas." Her words stuck to me like particularly stubborn chewing gum to a shoe. Kimberly, my college roommate turned lawyer, was my other lifeline. The sort of friend who'd help you hide a body whilst simultaneously explaining the legal ramifications. She'd helped me navigate the legal maze of starting my company. Her sharp mind catching contract loopholes I'd sailed right past in my optimistic naivety. The trust between us ran deeper than the Mariana Trench. She knew every single pound I had and precisely why I hid it. Danielle, a coder at my startup, was newer to my circle but loyal as they come, crunching numbers to keep our app's valuation airtight and occasionally reminding me to eat actual food rather than surviving on coffee and anxiety. I met Justin at a financial literacy gala in Indianapolis, because apparently, that's where romance happens when you're a finance nerd. My company had donated app access for low-income families, doing our bit for social good whilst also getting excellent publicity. It's called multitasking, darling. Justin was there because his family, big players in Michigan City's finance scene, never missed a high-profile event. Old money types collect charity galas like some people collect stamps. Justin stood out though. Not just his easy smile or sharp suit, but the way he asked actual questions about the cause rather than just nodding vapidly like the other trust fund types who'd clearly been dragged there by their publicists. We talked for hours about market gaps, lakeside runs, our shared obsession with Chicago-style pizza. When he asked for my number, I didn't hesitate, even knowing his family's clout. Which, in retrospect, was possibly my first mistake. But we'll get to that. The Barretts were old money. And I mean old like, we've been rich since before electricity was invented, old. Their investment firm had been a Midwest powerhouse since the railroad days, which means they'd been accumulating wealth and superiority complexes for generations. Our first date was a sunset walk along Lake Michigan's dunes, Justin carrying a thermos of coffee he'd brewed himself. He'd looked up my app beforehand, actual research, imagine that, and said he liked its clean design and mission. That was Justin, you see. Thoughtful, grounded, not flashing wealth like his peers who treated designer labels like personality traits. We fell fast, as one does when the dopamine hits. Weekend hikes turned into late-night debates about stock trends, failed attempts at homemade pasta that resulted in what can only be described as edible tragedy, and a connection that felt like home. He loved my drive, how I'd built something from nothing. I loved his fairness, the way he pushed for ethical deals despite his family's cutthroat legacy. My wealth never came up in conversation. It didn't seem to matter, which I found refreshing. I thought we were building something real, something equal. I thought a lot of things that turned out to be spectacularly wrong. Kimberly and Danielle cheered me on from the sidelines like supportive football fans. "He's solid," Kimberly said over coffee, though she added with her characteristic lawyerly caution, "but watch his family. Old money's tricky." She had a gift for understatement, that one. Danielle, crunching data at the office, agreed with the enthusiasm of someone who'd seen too many true crime documentaries. They'll expect you to fit their mold. Angela was considerably less subtle on our weekly calls. Bless her. "Rich families love control," she warned with the bluntness of a sledgehammer. "Don't let them push you." I brushed it off, caught up in the intoxicating haze of new love and the belief that surely his family couldn't be that bad. Narrator voice. They were, in fact, that bad. When Justin suggested meeting his parents after 6 months, I was nervous but hopeful. That peculiar combination of emotions that precedes most disasters. I wanted them to see me, Courtney, the woman who matched their son's heart, not some CV to be judged like an applicant for a particularly demanding position. The night before we drove to their beach house in Michigan City, Justin went quiet. That specific kind of quiet that screams, "I'm withholding information." "My family's intense," he said, staring at the lake with the expression of a man preparing for battle. "They've got expectations." I pressed for details because I'm nosy like that, but he waved it off, claiming it was just about appearances. His hesitation hit me wrong, like a note played slightly off-key. It felt like he was holding something back, protecting some dark family secret. I didn't push, figuring I'd see for myself soon enough. Lying awake that night, Angela's warning echoed in my head like a particularly annoying earworm. Hidden agendas. For the first time, I wondered if Justin was fully on my side, or if his family's shadow loomed larger than I'd thought. Spoiler. It absolutely did. The Barrett beach house in Michigan City loomed against the Lake Michigan dunes like something out of an architectural magazine. All glass and cedar, big enough to host a small wedding or, an elaborate psychological takedown. 6 months into dating Justin Barrett, he drove us there to meet his family. I'd felt that delightful knot of dread in my stomach since his cryptic warning the night before about their intensity. Stepping inside, the place screamed money with all the subtlety of a foghorn. Polished wood floors that probably cost more than most people's cars, a chandelier glinting over a view of the water that would make estate agents weep with joy. I wore a simple dress, nice but not showy, wanting them to see me rather than some polished version I'd created for their approval. This turned out to be mistake number 2, but we're counting. George Barrett, Justin's father, greeted us with a firm handshake. His tailored blazer screaming Midwest finance kingpin, in a language only other rich people could fully appreciate. Linda Barrett, his mother, offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You know the type, all teeth and zero warmth. Her silk scarf was probably worth my monthly rent, possibly more. Michelle Barrett, his older sister, leaned against the counter with the posture of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. Her sharp gaze sizing me up like I was a stock about to crash spectacularly. "Courtney, so nice to finally meet you," Linda said, her tone dripping with that particular brand of sweetness that's actually quite toxic. "NYU's respectable. Did scholarships cover everything?" The question sounded innocent to the untrained ear, but it wasn't. It was a dig, a subtle prod to establish my place in the social hierarchy. Translation. "Are you poor, darling? We need to know exactly how poor." Over dinner, which was, of course, an elaborate affair because these people don't do anything by halves, George talked investments with Justin, name-dropping clients I'd never heard of and effectively shutting me out of the conversation with the efficiency of a well-placed wall. Michelle chimed in, asking about my little app, like it was a hobby rather than an actual business. "Fintech is cute," she said, smirking with the confidence of someone who's never built anything themselves. "But real money's in established firms like ours." Justin squeezed my hand under the table in what I suppose was meant to be reassurance, but he didn't call her out. He didn't defend me. He just sat there, playing the dutiful son whilst I was slowly being fed to the wolves. Linda kept up the subtle jabs with the dedication of an Olympic athlete. "Your parents must be so proud being nurses. Such a practical career." I forced a smile, feeling very much like I was on trial for the crime of not being born into wealth. Guilty as charged, apparently. Ryan Clark, Justin's colleague from the firm, was also there, invited for some deal discussion that I suspected was actually just an excuse to observe me in my natural habitat. He seemed friendly enough but dropped hints about the Barrett expectations like breadcrumbs. "Family legacy is a big deal here," he said, glancing at me with what might have been sympathy or warning. I couldn't quite tell. Justin's lucky to carry it. It felt less like a compliment and more like a threat. I caught Justin's eye, seeking some sort of support or acknowledgement, but he looked away, focusing intently on his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. That stung more than Michelle's comments, if I'm honest. Things deteriorated further when Michelle pulled out her phone, texting someone with a sly grin that made my blood run cold. Later, I overheard her on a call outside, casually mentioning, checking her background. I didn't know who she was talking to, But alarm bells started ringing in my head like a particularly aggressive fire drill. Angela's words from our last call echoed ominously. Rich families love control. I texted Kimberly Ross that night, fingers shaking slightly. Justin's family's digging into me. Advice. She replied with the speed of someone who'd been expecting this exact message. Keep your cards close. Don't show your hand yet. Her calm focus grounded me like an anchor in a storm. She'd been my rock since college, always spotting the traps I'd merrily walked into. Back in Michigan City, Justin proposed a year later on a quiet beach near the dunes. His aunt's sapphire ring glinting in the sunset like something out of a film. I said yes, heart racing, thinking we'd build something together. A proper partnership, a life of equals. But his family's shadow lingered like a particularly stubborn stain, refusing to be ignored. Linda immediately pushed for a proper wedding venue, the implication being that I couldn't possibly afford their standards with my pathetic middle-class resources. I let it slide, pride keeping my 9 million quid secret locked up tighter than the Tower of London. I told myself it was a test. If they could love me without knowing my wealth, that meant something, right? Right. Narrator, it didn't. Danielle Ross, my startup's lead coder and voice of reason, noticed my increasing stress at work. They're testing you, she said, handing me our latest valuation report like it was a weapon. Which, in a sense, it was. Stay focused. Your app's killing it. Her support kept me steady when everything else felt like shifting sand. Michelle's behavior grew bolder, like she was testing boundaries to see exactly how much she could get away with. At a family brunch, because apparently, these people loved gathering to make me uncomfortable, she mentioned a friend who'd heard about my app. Heather Clark, Justin's ex-girlfriend, who'd apparently been texting Michelle about me. She thinks you're ambitious, Michelle said, her tone dripping with insinuation like poison from a very expensive bottle. I realized she was trying to rattle me, possibly even sabotage things. Justin brushed it off as sister stuff, but his dismissal felt wrong, like he was actively avoiding conflict rather than standing up for me. Red flag number approximately 47, but who's counting? Ryan, at that same brunch, let slip that Justin had been stressed about family expectations for months. He's got a lot riding on this, Ryan said, carefully not meeting my eyes. Another red flag waving frantically in the breeze, and I was running out of places to store them all. I rang Angela that night, pacing my apartment like a caged animal. Michelle's digging, maybe with Justin's ex involved. Something's not right. Angela didn't mince words. She never did, bless her. Sounds like they're building a case against you. Don't let them box you in. Her Chicago bluntness hit home like a well-aimed brick. I met Kimberly for coffee the next day, laying out my mounting pile of worries like evidence in a court case. She leaned forward, all business, eyes sharp. If they're digging, we dig back. I know a bloke, Scott Mills, a private investigator. He can look into their firm, see if they've got any skeletons rattling about. I hesitated because hiring a PI felt like an escalation, but her confidence was infectious. Do it, I said quietly, committing to what would turn out to be one of my better decisions. Scott Mills was a professional mid-40s with a knack for finding financial skeletons that people thought they'd buried deep enough. Kimberly hired him that week, tasking him with checking the Barrett investment firm for anything dodgy. Tax loopholes, questionable deals, the sort of thing that makes accountants break out in cold sweats. If they're playing dirty, we'll have leverage, Kimberly said, and I felt a peculiar mix of nerves and resolve. I wasn't the naive girl they thought I was. My app's success, my investments, my hustle, those were mine, and I wouldn't let the Barretts diminish them with their condescending smiles and subtle put-downs. As wedding planning ramped up into full chaos mode, Justin grew quieter. One night, walking by the lake, he admitted his family was pressuring him about our future. They just want what's best, he said, but his voice wavered like he wasn't entirely sure who he was trying to convince, me or himself. I pressed for details because I'm persistent like that, but he shut down, claiming it was complicated. That was the moment I knew, really knew, deep in my bones. He was hiding something, possibly even from himself. I went home that night, staring at the ceiling like it held answers, Angela's warning growing louder in my head. People hide agendas. I wasn't just walking into a family dinner soon. I was walking into an ambush, and I needed to be ready. Late that night, I slipped out to the balcony for air, and voices carried up from the beach house's patio below. Michelle was on her phone again, laughing with that particular brand of cruelty only the truly privileged can achieve. "The PI's got nothing big on her yet, but she's no match for us," she said, casual as anything. "Mum will handle it at the dinner." My blood ran cold. They were planning something, coordinating like a military operation, and Justin's silence suddenly felt heavier than concrete. I wasn't just meeting his family anymore. I was stepping into their carefully laid trap, and I had to be ready to spring it right back on them. Wedding planning started as a whirlwind of joy, all Pinterest boards and optimistic timelines, but it quickly revealed cracks wider than the Grand Canyon. Linda Barrett took over with the enthusiasm of a general planning a campaign, pushing for a lavish venue at a Michigan City country club, assuming I couldn't afford anything worthy of a Barrett. She picked out a towering cake from an upscale bakery, dismissing my choice of a simple lemon one as charming but not quite right. Translation: too poor, too simple, too you. I let it go, pride keeping my 9 million quid firmly under wraps. I figured once Justin and I were married, we'd carve out our own life away from their lakefront estate and its suffocating expectations. Distance makes the heart grow fonder and all that rot. My one non-negotiable was my dress. Sleek, modern, making me feel absolutely unstoppable. Even then, Linda hinted it was budget-friendly, her smile sharp as a blade dipped in acid. Justin tried to balance things, backing me on small choices like flowers whilst nudging me to compromise on the guest list when Linda added her socialite friends who I'd never met and frankly never wanted to. "It's just easier," he'd say, his voice soft but strained, and I gave in more than I wanted to, telling myself the details didn't matter as long as we ended up together. Spoiler alert. The details absolutely mattered. Michelle Barrett's probing from that first dinner lingered in my mind like a bad smell, especially her overheard call about hiring a PI. I kept my guard up, texting Kimberly to stay ready. "They're circling," I wrote. "Scott's on it," she replied, meaning our investigator was digging into their firm like an archaeologist searching for particularly incriminating fossils. 3 days before the wedding, everything was set. Venue booked, catering confirmed, my dress tailored to perfection. I was finalizing details with a photographer when Linda rang. Her voice syrupy enough to cause diabetes. "Courtney, join us for a family dinner tonight at the beach house. Just us to celebrate before the chaos." Justin was stuck at a client meeting, she said, so it'd be a cozy evening. I should have caught the trap in her tone, the slight edge beneath the sweetness, but I was running on coffee and stress, hoping desperately for a chance to connect with these people who would soon be my family. Fatal mistake. Agreed. Pulling into their driveway that evening, my Honda looked positively humble next to George's Bentley and Michelle's Porsche, an automotive representation of the class divide. The beach house dining room felt like a stage, all polished wood and lake views, the table set with plates that remained conspicuously untouched. This wasn't about dinner. This was theater. George Barrett sat at the head of the table like a king holding court. His suit crisp, exuding boardroom authority that could freeze water. Linda, in a designer dress that cost more than some people earn in a year, poured wine with practiced grace. Michelle lounged across from me, her smirk barely hidden, like a cat that spotted a particularly entertaining mouse. "Courtney, so glad you're here," Linda said, her smile tighter than her facelift. "We need to settle some business before the big day." My stomach dropped faster than the stock market in a crash. George slid a thick document across the table, its blue cover gleaming ominously. "This is a prenuptial agreement," he said with absolutely no preamble, no softening, just straight to business. "It protects our family's assets and outlines terms should the marriage end. Because nothing says, 'We believe in your love,' quite like planning for divorce before you've even exchanged vows." I stared at it, heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. Justin and I had never discussed this. Not once. Not even in passing. Linda leaned in, her perfume overwhelming. He understands its necessity. Barrett's spouses always sign. I doubted that intensely. Michelle's husband had come from money. Proper money. There'd been no need for protection there. This was specifically about me, the outsider, the interloper from Brooklyn who dared to infiltrate their precious bloodline. I scanned the pages, my finance brain automatically kicking into gear despite my emotional turmoil. It was brutal, absolutely savage. I'd get precisely nothing in a divorce, regardless of how long we were married. Zero. Zilch. Nothing. And there were clauses, actual clauses, that could claim my app's intellectual property. My work. My creation. The thing I'd built from nothing. This is completely one-sided, I said, voice steady despite the rage building in my chest like a volcano preparing to erupt. George waved a hand dismissively, like I was being tediously dramatic. Standard for our wealth level. And my business. My assets that they knew nothing about. Michelle laughed, loud and sharp like breaking glass. Your little app, she said with breathtaking condescension. It's not exactly Barrett level, dear. The way she said dear made it sound like an insult. The condescension burned hotter than acid. They saw me as a nobody, some social climber reaching too high, and they were putting me back in my place. We could add a clause for your company, George offered magnanimously, like throwing scraps to a dog. Justin's generous, you know. He supports small ventures. Small ventures. My £3 million company was a small venture. Linda produced a pen with the flourish of a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. Sign tonight. The wedding's close, I said, buying time whilst my brain raced. I need my lawyer to review this. George's eyes narrowed dangerously. Our attorney's top tier. 4 Barrett interests. Exactly. Not mine. Not mine, I shot back, finding my spine. Linda's smile faltered slightly. This is standard, Courtney. Practical. That word again, practical. The weapon of choice for people trying to manipulate you into doing something against your interests. Then 24 hours for review, I countered. They exchanged a glance. One of those married couple communications that happens in silence. Tonight, George said, voice hard as iron. Or the wedding's at risk. So it's sign or get out. I pressed, needing absolute clarity, needing them to say it out loud. Linda's eyes went cold. Properly cold, like all pretense had been stripped away. Barrett expectations aren't negotiable. If you love Justin, you'll sign. Because nothing says healthy relationship quite like emotional blackmail over a legal document. Michelle leaned back, smirking like she'd already won. Or get out. George said it bluntly, no sugarcoating. We've paid for this wedding. We'll cancel it if needed. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and threatening. They genuinely thought I'd cave. The middle-class girl desperate for their son, willing to sign away everything for the privilege of joining their family. I grabbed the document, hand somehow steady. I'll talk to Justin. Linda scoffed, a sound of pure derision. He knows his family duty. That cut deepest. The implication that he was in on this, that he'd been complicit all along. By morning, George said, clearly dismissing me. Sign or we're done. As I walked out, Michelle's voice drifted from the dining room, loud enough for me to hear. She'll sign. Who else gets a Barrett? Linda's laugh twisted the knife deeper. I drove off, tears blurring the lakefront road. Having to pull over once just to breathe and process what had just happened. Justin rang twice. I ignored him, too raw and furious to speak without saying things I couldn't take back. Ryan Clark texted out of absolutely nowhere. Heard you left upset. Justin knew about the prenup. Didn't want to stress you. My heart sank like a stone dropped in deep water. He was complicit. He'd known. They'd all known. Home, I rang Angela immediately. They ambushed me with a prenup, I said, voice shaking with rage and hurt. Ultimatum. Justin might have known. Probably definitely knew. But I was still clinging to some shred of hope. Angela didn't hesitate. Bless her direct soul. Don't bend, Courtney. They're bullies. You're worth more than their game. Her words steadied me like a hand on my shoulder. I texted Danielle Ross next, who'd been crunching our app's numbers. Need you to double-check the valuation tomorrow. On it, she replied instantly. You've got this. Kimberly was next on my emergency contact list. They hit me with a prenup, I told her, pacing my apartment like a caged tiger. It's a power grab. Her voice was all business, sharp and focused. Send me the document. Scott's got something on their firm, shady offshore deals. We'll hit back. My anger sharpened into laser focus. The Barretts wanted to fight. Fine. I wasn't the pushover they thought. I wasn't just protecting my heart anymore. I was ready to flip their entire world upside down and watch it spin. I sat in my Michigan City apartment, the prenup document heavy on my coffee table like it weighed approximately 17 tons, its pages screaming the Barrett arrogance in 12-point font. My hands still shook from the dinner ambush, but Angela's words, "Don't bend, Courtney," burned in my mind like a brand. I rang Kimberly first thing the next morning. They hit me with a prenup, I said, voice tight with controlled fury. It's a trap. I get nothing, and they could claim my app's intellectual property. Kimberly didn't flinch, she never did, which is why I loved her. Send it over. We'll tear it apart. Scott's got dirt on their firm. Offshore accounts, tax dodges. We're building a counter-offensive. Her confidence steadied me like a life raft in choppy waters. Let's hit back, I said, voice hard. Kimberly met me at a diner near the lake that morning. Her laptop open, eyes sharp as scalpels. She'd drafted a counter-prenup. Fair, balanced, protecting my $9 million and Justin's assets equally, with ironclad clauses for my app's IP that no lawyer could wriggle through. This levels the playing field, she said, sliding it across the table. But we need more leverage. Scott found a paper trail. The Barrett firm's been funneling money through shady Cayman accounts. It's our ace in the hole. I nodded, feeling the power shift. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was going on the offensive. Danielle rang next, confirming our app's latest valuation. $3 million locked in from our last funding round, she said with audible pride. Your numbers are rock solid. They can't touch you. Her support fueled me like high-octane petrol. I texted Angela, filling her in. They think I'm broke. I'm done hiding. Her reply was instant and perfectly Angela. Cut them loose if Justin's not all in. You're worth more. Her bluntness hit home. I needed to know where he stood once and for all. I rang Justin, heart pounding like a drum solo. He answered on the first ring, which somehow made it worse. Courtney, what happened? Mum said you stormed out. His voice was strained, but I wasn't buying the concerned act anymore. Your family ambushed me with a prenup, I said, keeping my tone even through sheer force of will. Sign or get out, they said. You knew, didn't you? The silence that followed was deafening. Answer enough, really. Then finally, I meant to tell you, he admitted, voice low and guilty. I thought I'd handle it later. Later. 3 sodding days before our wedding. You let them blindside me. It's family tradition, he said, defensive now. Protects our trusts. And my business. Pressed rage building. They wrote clauses to claim my app. Another pause, heavy with implications. That's not right, he said, but his hesitation screamed complicity louder than words ever could. Ryan told me you were in on it, I said, voice hard as granite. You knew from the start. He didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it. I didn't want to stress you, he mumbled pathetically. It's just a paper. Just a paper. Just a paper. It's control, Justin, I snapped. Your family thinks I'm a nobody, and you let them. He sighed, using that insufferable lawyer tone I'd come to hate. You're overreacting. We can fix it after the wedding. After. When I'd already signed away my rights. When they'd already won. Your mum said it's non-negotiable for a Barrett wife, I reminded him coldly. We'll figure it out, he hedged, which was basically admitting he had no plan whatsoever. Family trusts are complicated. Hard for a nurse's kid to understand. The echo of Linda's condescension in his words cut deeper than anything else. My own fiancé, parroting his mother's classist rubbish. If it's so simple, why let them threaten to cancel our wedding? Silence. Nothing. Choose Justin, I said, voice breaking slightly. Me or them. I love you, he said, which would have meant something if he'd stopped there. But they're family. And there it was. The truth. He wasn't all in. He never had been. I hung up without another word. Tears were hot on my face, but my resolve burned hotter. A text buzzed from an unknown number. Heather Clark, Justin's ex, forwarded by Michelle because of course she had. Heard you're marrying up. Careful. Barretts don't keep strays long. The sabotage was crystal clear. Michelle was pulling strings, trying to shake me, trying to make me doubt myself. Well, that backfired spectacularly. I saved the text, forwarding it immediately to Kimberly. Michelle's playing dirty, I wrote. Use this. Kimberly's reply was immediate and gleeful. Got it. Scott's dirt is ready. Their firm's dodging taxes like it's an Olympic sport. We'll bury them. I met Danielle at the office later. Her desk absolutely buried in valuation reports like some kind of financial fortress. You're at 3 million, she said, handing me the numbers like a sacred text. Show them who you really are. I nodded, my mind racing through scenarios, planning my next moves like a chess grandmaster. Angela rang as I drove home, voice sharp with sisterly concern. Justin knew, she asked, already furious on my behalf. Dump him now, Courtney. You don't need a man who won't fight for you. Her words sank in like stones dropping into water. She was absolutely right. This wasn't just about the Barretts anymore. Justin's silence, his cowardice, his refusal to choose me. That was the real betrayal. The prenup was just a symptom. Kimberly rang that evening. Her voice positively electric with anticipation. Scott's got enough to rattle them properly. Offshore accounts tied to George's firm. Sketchy enough to raise serious eyebrows with the tax authorities. The counter prenup's ready. When do we strike? I thought of Michelle's smirk, Linda's fake sweetness dripping like poison, George's ultimatum delivered with such arrogant confidence, Justin's pathetic excuses. Tomorrow, I said, voice steady and cold. We meet them at the lakefront restaurant. I'm done playing nice. Kimberly laughed. Properly laughed. The sound of someone anticipating a spectacular victory. That's my girl. We'll wipe their smug grins clean off their privileged faces. I barely slept that night, my mind mapping every step, every reveal, every moment of their inevitable shock. The Barretts thought they'd cornered a nobody, some desperate middle-class girl grateful for their son's attention. But they were about to meet Courtney Jenkins, the woman with 9 million quid and absolutely zero patience left for their games. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that restaurant with Kimberly's counter prenup, Scott's dirt on their dodgy dealings, and the truth about my wealth. They'd pushed too far, and I was ready to push back so hard they'd feel it for years. The lakefront restaurant in Michigan City gleamed under the evening sun like something from a lifestyle magazine, its glass walls reflecting the dunes in that annoyingly picturesque way that made you forget people's lives were imploding inside. I'd chosen it deliberately for the showdown, public enough to keep things civil, theoretically, private enough to deliver devastating blows without an audience of strangers filming it for TikTok. Kimberly Ross sat beside me, her leather portfolio packed with our counter prenup and all of Scott's delicious dirt on the Barretts. I wore a tailored black dress, sharp and unyielding, the sartorial equivalent of a declaration of war, with my aunt's sapphire earrings glinting as a reminder of my roots and precisely where my money came from. Justin Barrett, George Barrett, Linda Barrett, and Michelle Barrett arrived exactly 10 minutes late. Power move, obviously. Can't have the peasant thinking she's their equal by arriving on time. George's suit screamed authority. Linda's designer gown dripped wealth like she was literally hemorrhaging money. Michelle's smirk was sharp as ever. And Justin looked absolutely drained. His tie slightly askew. But he should be uncomfortable. Courtney, let's make this quick, Linda said, settling in with the air of someone about to dismiss a servant. Have you signed? Her tone assumed compliance. Assumed I'd fallen into line like a good little future daughter-in-law. I slid the counter prenup across the table, my face carefully calm. Not your version. This one's fair. Protects my assets and Justin's equally, with specific clauses for my app's intellectual property. The word "my" hung in the air like a challenge. George's eyebrows shot up so fast they nearly left his face. Your assets. Michelle snorted. Actually snorted like a particularly unpleasant pig. What assets? Your little startup. I held their gaze, utterly unflinching, savoring this moment like fine wine. 9 million pounds. 6 million from my aunt's estate. 3 million from my company's current valuation. I'm not the broke girl you thought I was. The silence that followed was absolutely delicious. The sort of silence you could bottle and sell. The table went dead quiet. Linda's wine glass froze midway to her mouth, suspended in shock. Michelle's smirk vanished like someone had wiped it off with a cloth. George's jaw tightened so hard I thought he might crack a tooth. Justin's eyes widened in what looked like genuine surprise, but he said nothing. That hurt most if I'm being honest. Even now he couldn't find words. That's impossible, Linda stammered, her composure cracking like cheap plaster. You live in a modest apartment. You drive a Honda. I value substance over flash, I said smoothly, enjoying every syllable. Unlike some people. The barb landed beautifully. George grabbed the financial statements I'd brought, because of course I'd brought proof I'm not an amateur. His lawyer's eyes scanning rapidly, searching desperately for some indication this was fake. These are legitimate, he muttered, absolutely stunned. You could practically hear his worldview shattering. Michelle's face had gone an interesting shade of red. Why hide this? She snapped, anger replacing shock. Why play poor? To be loved for me, I said, voice steady as a rock. Not my money. But you all failed that test spectacularly. The truth hung there, ugly and undeniable. Time for the second reveal. Your prenup was a power grab, I said, tapping our counterversion with one perfectly manicured finger. This one's balanced. Equal splits based on marriage length. No claims on my intellectual property whatsoever. George flipped through it, his frown deepening with each page like he was reading his own obituary. This changes things, he admitted grudgingly. But Linda cut in, desperately trying to regain control. We need time to review this properly. You gave me none, I shot back. You said sign or get out. Now you've got until tomorrow. See how you like that particular brand of pressure. Michelle scoffed, but her confidence was cracking like ice in spring. Third reveal, because why stop when you're winning? I pulled out my phone, displaying Heather Clark's text that Michelle had so thoughtfully forwarded. Heard you're marrying up. Careful. Barretts don't keep strays long. Michelle went pale. Properly pale, like someone had drained her blood. You sent this, I said, staring her down with the intensity of a prosecutor. Using Justin's ex to scare me off. How very classy of you. It backfired rather spectacularly, I'm afraid. Linda gasped, turning to her daughter with what might have been genuine shock. You did what? Michelle stammered. It was just a warning. It was sabotage, I interrupted coldly. And it proves you're terrified of who I really am. Not some poor girl you could control, but someone who might actually be your equal. Or, heaven forbid, you're better. Fourth reveal, and this one was the coup de grace. Scott Mills, my private investigator, found something rather interesting, I said, sliding over his report with a casual air of someone discussing the weather. Your firm's been dodging taxes through Cayman accounts. Shady deals, questionable ethics. That's your legacy, George. That's the great Barrett dynasty. George's face went ashen, his hands gripping the papers like they might somehow dissolve if he held them tight enough. This is inaccurate, he said, but his voice shook like a leaf in a hurricane. Linda looked betrayed, Michelle frozen in horror. The perfect family facade was crumbling in real time, And it was glorious. Justin finally spoke, voice low and pathetic. "Courtney, why go this far?" I turned to him, my heart heavy but my resolve absolute. "Because you knew about their prenup from the start and let them ambush me." That was the fifth reveal. His complicity laid bare for everyone to see. That was the real betrayal, Justin. Not the document. You. Justin's eyes dropped like a scolded child. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he mumbled. "I thought I could fix it somehow." "You chose them," I said, voice breaking slightly but clear as crystal. "You let them think I was nothing. That's not love, darling. That's cowardice." He reached for my hand. Actually reached for it like physical contact would somehow undo everything. "Courtney, please. We can work this out." I pulled back like he was radioactive. "No, Justin. I'm done with half measures. I'm done with being underestimated. I'm done with you." I stood, Kimberly beside me in solidarity, and dropped the final bomb. "The wedding's off. I'm walking away with my £9 million, my dignity, and my self-respect. You lot can keep your toxic dynasty." Michelle's mouth actually gaped open. Linda's eyes welled with what might have been tears or might have been rage. Difficult to tell, really. George's face was stone, the mask of a man who just lost a battle he'd assumed he'd already won. Justin looked absolutely gutted, but I didn't waver. Not even a flicker. My phone buzzed. Kimberly signaling that the transfer was confirmed, my safety net secure. I smiled, the same smile from that first dinner, and walked out. Their smug grins were gone, replaced by shock, regret, and the dawning realization that they'd catastrophically underestimated me. I didn't look back. Not once. What would be the point? Outside, the lake air hit me. Cool, fresh, liberating, like breathing for the first time in months. I'd spent years hiding my worth, trying to be loved for myself rather than my bank account. But the Barretts and Justin had shown me that love without respect is worthless. It's just pretty words with no foundation. I rang Angela immediately as I drove home. "It's done," I said, voice surprisingly steady. "Wedding's off." She exhaled, and I could hear the relief. "You did right, Courtney. You're free now. Properly free." Danielle texted moments later. "Proud of you. Still climbing, by the way. We're killing it. Because life goes on, business continues, and success doesn't pause for romantic catastrophes." Kimberly rang later, actually laughing with delight. "Scott says their firm's scrambling to cover those offshore accounts. You properly shook them. They're panicking." Sitting in my apartment that night, I reflected on the absolute whirlwind of the past few months. I'd learned a brutal lesson about self-respect, about the difference between being loved and being valued. The Barretts saw wealth as power, a tool to control people, to maintain their position in the social hierarchy. I saw it as independence, as freedom to live authentically without compromising my values. Their fundamental mistake was underestimating me, assuming I'd bend to fit their mold like some sort of human origami. But I wasn't their pawn. I was never their pawn. I was Courtney Jenkins, built from scratch, forged in the fires of Brooklyn and NYU and countless midnight oil-burning sessions. And I'd never, ever compromise my value again. Not for anyone to owe anyone listening to this tale of woe, betrayal, and financial plot twists. Here's my warning, delivered with all the hard-earned wisdom of someone who's been through the ringer. Don't ignore the signs of disrespect. Not from family, not from a partner, not from their allies or their friends or their sodding pet hamster. If they demand you shrink to fit their world, if they need you to be smaller to make them feel bigger, walk away. Run even. Sprint like you're being chased by bears. Equality and independence aren't negotiable. They're not optional extras you can add later like heated seats in a car. They're the foundation of a life actually worth living. I learned that the hard way, through tears and rage and that peculiar combination of humiliation and empowerment that comes from standing up to people who think they're untouchable. The Barretts thought their money made them superior, thought their old family name gave them the right to treat people like commodities. Justin thought he could have it both ways, keep his family happy while somehow also keeping me. He was wrong. You can't serve two masters, especially when one of them views the other as fundamentally lesser. I learned that hiding your worth, your real worth, financial or otherwise, to test whether people love you for yourself is a noble idea that rarely works in practice. Because the sort of people who would treat you badly if they knew you had money will often find other reasons to treat you badly. The Barretts didn't dismiss me because they thought I was poor. They dismissed me because I wasn't one of them, wasn't born into their world, didn't have the right pedigree. The money was just the excuse. I learned that love without respect is just a pretty word for tolerating someone's presence. Justin might have loved me in his way, but he didn't respect me enough to stand up to his family. He didn't value me enough to choose me over their approval. And that's not love. That's convenience with romantic window dressing. I learned that sometimes the trash takes itself out, and you should let it go with gratitude. The wedding falling apart 3 days before the ceremony felt catastrophic in the moment, but it saved me from a lifetime of being belittled, controlled, and treated like I should be grateful for the privilege of their company. Most importantly, I learned that I'd rather be alone and respected than partnered and diminished. That my aunt's £6 million and my company's £3 million weren't just numbers in an account. They were freedom. Freedom to walk away from situations that didn't serve me. Freedom to demand better. Freedom to be fully, unapologetically myself. The Barretts are still out there, presumably scrambling to deal with their tax situation, and wondering how the poor girl from Brooklyn managed to pull the rug out from under them so completely. Justin's probably being lectured by his mother about that dreadful woman, and how he dodged a bullet. Michelle's likely telling her friends some twisted version where I'm the villain, the gold digger who somehow had more gold than all of them combined. And me. I'm running my company, watching it grow, making decisions without anyone's approval but my own. I'm having weekly calls with Angela where we laugh about the whole debacle. I'm working with Kimberly on expanding the business. I'm living in my modest apartment by choice, not necessity, driving my reliable Honda because I genuinely like it, not because I can't afford better. I'm free. Properly, genuinely free. And that's worth more than all the Barrett money and social standing combined. The final word. Subscribe and share your story. So thank you for hearing my story. Really, genuinely, thank you for sticking through this absolute odyssey of dysfunction, betrayal, and ultimately liberation. It's not just about me and my catastrophically failed engagement to a man with the spine of a jellyfish. It's about knowing your worth and standing absolutely firm when people try to convince you you're worth less than you are. If this resonated with you, if you've ever been in a situation where someone tried to make you smaller to fit their world, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment about a time you had to stand up to being underestimated, undervalued, or just generally treated like rubbish. Your story might inspire someone else to walk away from what doesn't serve them. Because here's the thing they don't tell you in romantic films. Sometimes the happy ending isn't getting the guy. Sometimes it's realizing you never needed him in the first place. Sometimes it's walking away with your head high, your bank account intact, and your self-respect firmly in hand. The Barretts wanted me to sign away my rights, my work, my future, all for the privilege of joining their family. They thought I'd be desperate enough, grateful enough, small enough to do it. They thought wrong. Spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. And if there's one thing I hope you take from this absolute circus of a story, it's this. Never make yourself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. Never sign away your power because someone tells you that's what love requires. Never, ever accept being treated as less than you are. You're worth more than that. You're worth more than convenient love and conditional acceptance. You're worth more than a family who views you as a threat to be managed rather than a person to be valued. Stand your ground. Know your worth. And if they can't see it, well, that's their loss, not yours. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got a company to run, an app to scale, and absolutely zero patience left for people who think my postcode determines my value. Courtney Jenkins, signing off. £9 million richer, one toxic relationship lighter, and infinitely better off for it. Don't let the bastards grind you down. Trust me on this one.